Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Sunday, September 13th, 2020, and I'm sure you can guess by the title of this video, we're going to be talking about the best case map for the Democrats on the presidential map and then move over into the Senate. The House of Representatives map is a little bit more tricky. Pretty much a best case scenario for them would just be reaching 2008 numbers, but there is actually a model for that on Lean Toss-Up. They actually predict the Democrats will gain that many seats, but at the end of the day, I think that we're going to see somewhere around 230 to 240 for the Democrats. That's probably where it's going to stay after Election Day, but in a best case scenario, that map I think is a very good representation of it. I just won't have it on the screen right here. We're going to go from president to Senate. And we'll talk about, where this map was just a couple of months ago. Actually, not just a couple of months ago, back in March 2020. So, it's still the same year. I don't know why I mentioned 2020, but pretty much this was the map. Back in March when I made a video about this, the best case scenario for Joe Biden, and it gave Joe Biden 359 electoral votes. No president has hit 350 plus, besides Obama and Clinton, and I guess you could say quote unquote modern political history. For the Democratic Party, I guess the half century that we're talking about. But, Joe Biden hitting 350 would be very monumental. Number one, because 2008 was viewed as a landslide election for Barack Obama. It was. The Democrats nearly hit 60 seats in the Senate. They had over 250 House seats following that election. They were doing very well in, the governorships, and they're also doing very well in the presidential level. Obama flipped Indiana, a state that had gone to Bush, by 20% in the previous election. So, when we're looking at this map, you would see why some of these states would be narrow and why, Joe Biden was able to carry some of them. But we're going to be talking about them a little bit more intently. And we're also going to see a shift in some of these states because in a best case scenario now, Joe Biden has expanded the electoral map. He's became competitive, in a number of other districts and states. And I think that a lot of these states definitely need a race rating change. So let's start off with the safe states for Joe Biden. He'd easily win the West Coast. I don't think that's up for grabs. I have seen some comments on some of my videos talking about a red California. It's not realistic. It's not going to happen. You're getting your hopes up for nothing. It doesn't make any type of sense whatsoever. There's absolutely nothing that indicates California would go red this election. 183 electoral votes are normally what I characterize as safe for Joe Biden. Pretty much we're talking about, I guess you could include New Mexico because we are talking about a best case scenario map. But these are the states that I think Joe Biden could carry by a 15% margin or higher. And since we are talking about a map where we're going to be seeing, Joe Biden dominate the Electoral College, we're probably going to see a number of other states shift in favor of, Joe Biden. So we'll still see the standard, routine of all of the likely states. I believe I had Kansas as a likely state. Yeah, I did. And then Missouri, Indiana, Mississippi, South Carolina, and Montana, just because of them expecting to narrow down on Election Day. So I'm going to stick by those characterizations. I don't think that's going to change too heavily. I'm going to have to move Utah into likely. I normally characterize it as safe, but with the firm opposition from the Romney family against Donald Trump, it's going to be very hard to garner a lot of that Mormon vote. And they're going to be a lot more, comfortable voting for someone like Biden, who's way more popular in that state than Hillary Clinton was. And, with Evan McMullin, the person who got 21% of the vote in 2016 in that state, endorsing Joe Biden, I don't think that Biden could win the state, even in a best case scenario, just that it would be narrower than expected, especially in a two-way race. Mitt Romney defeated, the last time Joe Biden was on a presidential ballot, Obama in this state by 50%. It was 75 to 25 in the state. So that's pretty substantial. Donald Trump's vote share in Utah in 2016 was only 48%. So he got a plurality in the state. Moving past here, Nebraska at large, Nebraska's first district, Nebraska's third district, expected to be, actually the first district does have some interesting stuff. We'll talk about that in a separate video. I'm going to reanalyze what I'm rating that, district as just because of the 538 model, giving me a little bit of a surprise in that area. Nebraska's second district, we'll talk about as we get through the video. So the remaining states, I guess, I would consider Alaska to be likely and South Carolina to be likely. I had South Carolina as likely before, but Alaska I had as safe. Generally, these states will be likely states even in regular presidential elections. Even in a year where Donald Trump was able to rewrite the electoral map, he only carried, Alaska by 14% and South Carolina by 14%. Moving past this, we have 125 electoral votes for Donald Trump. Let's talk about the states that Joe Biden will easily carry. So, in a best case scenario, he'd carry Nevada, he'd carry Colorado, he'd carry Virginia, the entire Rust Belt. That's not really a surprise to many people. He's already at 270. He'd easily carry New Hampshire. He'd easily carry Maine at large, and I don't think that would be something up for debate. Now, if we look at the rest of the states, a lot of these are traditional swing states. I think that in a best case scenario, Arizona could go likely blue, but that's the last time I'll characterize any of these other states or any of these remaining gray states as likely. The rest are going to be lean or possibly tilt. And if we're looking at, Biden's numbers being at 289 and Trump being at 125, there's a whole number of other states where, Joe Biden could be making inroads in. If we're talking about an election where this is the best case scenario, Biden won't have to be worrying about the Rust Belt. This is exactly why I think the electoral map would expand if Biden had a very, very good election. Now, not to say this election isn't going good for Biden. I mean, looking at the national numbers, he's doing pretty well. He's up 7% nationwide, and that's been pretty consistent throughout the entire campaign season. So when we're looking at this map, you have to understand why Texas is all of a sudden rated as a pure toss-up, why Kansas is closer than before. This would have to be due to the fact that, number one, we'd be seeing increased minority turnout, which is why Mississippi and South Carolina are likely. On top of that, we'd also have to see that resources would be, moved around to different states, which is why, Joe Biden had a full force campaign in all of the swing states, and including all the remaining 124 toss-up electoral votes. It is possible that he does win in some of these states. I mean, if he focused all of his attention on Texas, he could win it. But if he focused all of his attention there during a regular election, he could possibly lose the Rust Belt and lose the election. It really all depends, but this election is going very well for Joe Biden at this point, but we have a number of things to come out in October that could potentially sway the election in one way or another. Moving past that, Joe Biden at 289. Let's talk about some of these other swing states. I would say Florida goes to Biden. North Carolina easily goes to Biden. That's something that I, used in the map earlier, and makes sense. I mean, these are traditional swing states. There's no reason why Joe Biden wouldn't be able to carry them. I don't think he'd go past lean, though. Honestly, even in the best Joe Biden could do, these are still swing states with a Republican lean at heart. So it's going to be very difficult. I mean, Florida, North Carolina are both pretty much immune to wave years. So I will say that Joe Biden, even in his best case, will still probably carry it, at most 4% statewide. Let's move on to Ohio and Iowa. I think that these are narrowly in reach for Joe Biden if we're talking about, not Indiana, if we're talking about a landslide election for Joe Biden. It's not going to be easy. Definitely not. I mean, Trump won these states by very solid margins in 2016, but Iowa and Ohio, I definitely say that, Joe Biden is going to do relatively well for talking about a best case map for him. Looking at Ohio and, what Trump has said about Goodyear and a number of other things that have happened in the past 4 years, especially with the economy. I mean, the economy was a very strong issue across the entirety of the Rust Belt, including Iowa and Ohio. I mean, these are areas that are probably hit very hard. I mean, are being hit very hard with this, economic downfall. And obviously, we're slowly recovering, and we are amidst a global pandemic. But someone has to take the responsibility for it, and it can't be the person not in office. Joe Biden has no responsibilities at this point. So anything negative that happens to the United States falls under Donald Trump just because he's the incumbent. Now, there are, reasons as to why the Democratic Party could pin it on Donald Trump, whether it's due to his actions or the things that he says on Twitter, but there are a number of reasons why the American electorate, even if it wasn't Donald Trump's fault, they would view him as, the reason why all of this is happening because he's the president. He's supposed to safeguard these things, make sure things like this never happen. But anyways, that's why I think that, Ohio and Iowa could narrowly go to Joe Biden. I think Biden would be able to carry Nebraska's 2nd district and in a best case, Maine's 2nd district. I don't know why I characterize Nebraska's 2nd as tilt. In my best case scenario for Joe Biden, I think that he'd carry it by a lean margin. Looking at the remaining 2 states, we have 54 toss-up electoral votes, Georgia and Texas. I think this is pretty surprising to say the least. The fact that Texas and Georgia are now competitive. I mean, these are states that were not competitive really in the past. Georgia was a 9-point margin of victory for Trump in 2016, 16 points in 2012 for Mitt Romney, but now Trump is only up by 1%. And, this just means that Biden needs to outperform the polls as Hillary Clinton did in 2016. The polls in 2016 indicated that Trump would carry Texas by 12%. Hillary Clinton ended up losing by 9%. She, did better, or at least Trump's margin decreased from the polls from 12 down to 9. And if Trump is up by 1 and the polls were as wrong as they were in 2016, I think that's a major playing point from the right-wing media, which never works because if that happened, Biden would still win the election. Biden actually ends up winning Texas. And I think in a best case, Texas could be tilt blue. That's 38 electoral votes. Look where that puts Biden. 397, 3 away from 400. And where does he get the remaining 3 plus more, plus an additional 13 from Georgia? Trump is only up here by 1.6%. Now, this was actually almost spot on in terms of the polls in 2016, but if we're talking about a scenario where Biden is running up the numbers larger than he is right now, all he needs is a minimal 2% boost in the state of Georgia, and then he's the winner. And I think, in a best case scenario, I'm going to move away from this map because I think Georgia and Texas very well could be, tilt blue states in a best case map, which gives Joe Biden 413 electoral votes and Donald Trump 125. So, this would be flipping numerous states. We're talking about flips in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Iowa, North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Texas, Arizona, Maine, 2nd District, Nebraska, 2nd District, 12 districts or states flipping from 2016. And we're talking about more solid margins in Virginia, in Colorado, in Nevada, in Minnesota, in New Hampshire, in Maine, an additional 7 more states that have moved further to the right. To the left, not to the right. And then New Mexico moves over into the safe Democratic column. So, I said I was going to talk about the Senate map, so we can move on to there just because we are talking about the best the Democrats can do in 2020. So let's focus on the Senate map. We've passed the presidential map. Let's talk about, where the Democrats could do. Now, this isn't by no means, a dream scenario. I'm actually going to be releasing a map talking about that sometime in the future, just because that would be something where the Democrats would have not only is everything working right, but, way more than that. We're talking about this is something that they could only come up with in their heads, which I will do for the Republican Party as well. But I do want to make a map about that because it would be pretty funny to see. So the Democrats would, lock down the states that they already have locked down, Colorado, Arizona, states that already are going to the Democratic Party. Let me go ahead and click donut because that looks better. Michigan would be considered likely. I don't think there should be too much of a surprise there. Idaho, Wyoming, South Dakota, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Tennessee, West Virginia. These are all states that are pretty much out of reach for the Democrats. Now let's focus on, a number of other states on this map. So for the Democrats, I think that they could carry North Carolina by a likely margin in their best case. I think the same could be said for Sarah Gideon's race up in Maine. That puts the Democrats at 50, and from what you've seen on the electoral map in the, literally a minute ago, they would be able to take the majority just with a 50-50 tie, but they're going to get more than 50-50. I think that in a best case, Iowa would still be lean Democrat, and so would Montana, which means the Democrats would pick up 2 seats here. Montana would officially have 2 Democratic senators following the 2020 election, and since they are expected to gain a House of Representatives seat, they could end up with 2 Democrats or possibly 1 Democrat, 1 Republican. And that puts the Democrats at 52, the Republicans at 39. Let's take a look at some other states. I think in a best case, we could see John Ossoff narrowly carry, David Perdue's seat in Georgia. I think that this, special election seat is still likely Republican, just because at this point we see no data that puts the Democrats at a competitive position to take a second-place spot or even a first-place spot in the runoff election. I have no idea why my voice is dying. It'll be fixed by the next video. But Georgia Senate special election goes to the Republicans, even in this best-case map. Honestly, the Democrats are just doing so poorly there that it's very hard for me to draw a map where they're even able to carry that Senate special election. As we look at Alabama, I think the best case would be that Doug Jones narrowly retains his seat. We're talking maybe a 2017 special election margin of victory. It'd be very, very close. Looking in Kentucky, I think that Mitch McConnell will still narrowly carry it. I think the best case map would be Kentucky going lean, South Carolina going lean as well. It's going to be very difficult to see Jamie Harrison pulling out a victory there. In Mississippi, I think the best case map is still going to be considering it likely. Cindy Hyde-Smith is still the favorite to win that election, most rated as safe. I normally characterize it as likely. I'm going to keep that characterization. In Kansas, I think the best map would be, Barbara Boyer narrowly carrying the Senate race there, but I still think in both Alaska and Texas that the Republicans will narrowly hold out an edge there. John Cornyn is consistently outperforming Donald Trump in the state. I mean to characterize it as lean. And then Alaska, I think that that'll be a very close race in a best case map, but still narrowly taking it away for the Republicans. I think, 2008, that only narrowly went to the Democrats because of what was happening with the incumbent senator. And it's going to be very difficult in a presidential election year to see Alaska all of a sudden shift too far to the left. I mean, they didn't even do it in 2018. So it was very difficult for us to see the Democrats winning the Senate race there, or the independent who is expected to caucus with the Democrats. Same thing in Texas. MJ Heger, while she may be individually a good candidate in a House race, not so much in a Senate race, and she's no Beto O'Rourke by any means. Now, Barbara Boyer, fundraising in numbers that no Kansas candidate has ever seen in election history. I think that, with just the right amount of things happening for her, Roger Marshall is still a traditionally weak candidate that she could end up winning there. Doug Jones would need something to happen to Tommy Tuberville, the same thing that happened to Roy Moore, something similar in order to win that election. I think that it's possible if something does come out in October, which is why this is a best case map. If everything works right for the Democratic Party, Alabama goes blue. Jon Ossoff is a generally strong candidate. I honestly think that he's a very, good campaigner, but, we're talking about virtual events and everything, so it may be more difficult in a traditionally GOP state to get out the vote and, get a lot of Democrats out to, actually all depends on minority turnout, which is going to be crucial for Democrats in Georgia. Now, if Biden's able to carry Georgia on the presidential level, it is possible. Ossoff also carries Georgia on the Senate level. Then Montana, Iowa, Maine, and North Carolina are traditional, toss-up Senate races that, move back and forth between Democrat control and Republican control. So that's pretty much it for this video. Biden gets 413 electoral votes. The Democrats get 55 seats in the United States Senate. Again, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Not again, though. I just said it for the first time. Check out the Instagram and Twitter. And at the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord link for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch and then a playlist for my 2020 election predictions. In the description box, there is merchandise that I am selling, so go ahead and check that out as well. Again, thank you all for watching, and I will see you all later today.